Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Wrong End of the Snake. It's a webcast about audio, touring, and the relationships between our second families, our road families, that will be reunited soon. Tater and I have had an 18-year relationship on The Wrong End of the Snake with bands like Ted Nugent, Kid Rock, Slash, Stone Temple Pilots, Prophets of Rage, Iron Maiden, and most notably 10 years with Linkin Park. Jim Digby's here from the Showmaker Symposium and Event Safety Alliance. He's a production manager with 30-plus years in the touring business. He's a 4-time Top Dog Production Manager of the Year and Parnelli Production Manager of the Year award winner. Welcome, Jim. My co-host is Kevin Tater McCarthy. He's a world-class monitor engineer, also with 30-plus years in the business, a multi-award winner. He has 8 Top Dog Monitor Engineer of the Year awards and 2 Parnelli Monitor Mixer of the Year awards. And I am Ken Van Druten, a.k.a. Pooch. I'm a front house engineer with 30 years in the business. I'm a 3-time Grammy-nominated recording engineer. I have 8 Top Dog Front of House Engineer of the Year awards, and I'm winner of the Parnelli Front of House Mixer of the Year. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Please use the chat part of the Zoom app to communicate amongst yourselves and comment. Jim will be keeping an eye on that. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom app and ask in that window. We will answer as many as possible during the hour, but any we don't get to, we will answer in a follow-up video released Wednesday or Thursday each week, posted to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and our social media, Instagram and Facebook, is at Wrong End of the Snake. This week, it's Dave SHADOAN, and Tater, take it from here.
All right, well, let's welcome Dave, who's as we all know, is one of the original 4 Parnelli board members and also the winner of the Lifetime Achievement Award for Audio Innovation with his partner, Ross Rito from Sound Image, the president, the big cheese, the head kahuna, the man with the nice beard this week around, Mr. Dave SHADOAN. We're damn glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Yes, my beard, I started on the day we shut down, and I'm not shaving it until I go back into the office.
We hope that's
it's
soon,
a first.
not for the beard shaving reason.
Well, I've never had one before. It's kind of interesting.
It's a good look for you. It's a good look for you, Dave.
It's a good look.
Yeah. Well, you know, if we don't come back to work, I can always be Santa.
Excellent. So, Dave, let's start out and talk about the early days of Sound Image to get started, bring everybody up to speed, how it started, how you came from Ohio to the lovely Southern California, Escondido area to start Sound Image, and with Ross and your other partners, and how that all came together.
Well, originally it was called Silverfish Audio, which was the original company, which was founded in '71 by Joel Silverman and Ross. And I met Ross in either 76 or 7 when they came to the West Coast. And I came here in early 75, I guess it was, or late 74. I came out here after I got out of high school with my buddy, you know, in the typical van with, you know, psychedelic paint on it. And we spent about 7 or 8 months traveling around because I grew up in a small town in Ohio called Sydney, Ohio. So we wanted to see as much as we could see. And, you know, like most of us, I started out learning how to play music, you know, in the public school system in 5th grade. And so through all of that, you know, that was kind of, I think, in a way, you know, you really don't know when you're 18 years old what you're going to do for sure. But the reason to come to California at that time was to try to find something to do with music. It wasn't this, obviously. But then I met Ross through another friend of mine. And then we started being good friends. And that led to some work and for me. And in the midst of all of that, there was Joel was taken out from the company, and he went to work for Delta Lab, I think it was, and then went on to Lexicon and other things and became a manufacturing guy. And then in 1979, I think it was, we started the process, Ross and I getting the other guy out of the company as far as purchasing him out. And that's when we started Sound Image, because we were building a video studio of all crazy things, which will lead up to another question you're going to ask me, Tater, about why I don't do anything else. And we spent about every dollar we could beg, borrow, or steal to build this thing. And that's where the name Sound Image came from, because we became a sound company and an image company. And that was the marrying of it. And one of the original guys, a guy named Joe Ciccolini, I'm not sure if any of you guys ever met him, but he was a production manager for many, many years. And he was the original front of house guy for the Jimmy Buffett and the Coral Reefer Band for probably 10 years. And he was the one that actually came up with the name, Sound Image. That was his idea. And then we just went from there. And as I said, the video thing was luckily we got out of it with our skin still on. I think we invested something like $3.5 million, back in
And this
those
was
days.
what year?
We built a world-class studio. Well, we started building it in 80, and we opened for business in 82. And it was all kind of centered around, maybe it was 83. I don't know. It took a while because we had to raise all this money, and we just kept going along as we all do in this business. You take steps because you got to make the money to spend the money. It was a process, especially back in those days, because banks or any kind of financial institution didn't want to talk to people like us. They didn't understand what we did. Wasn't a car or a house or anything like that. So, I'd say we probably opened in probably 83. And it was all centered around, at that time, remember, that's right when MTV started getting big, and they started shooting. Originally, they were all just like performance-based videos, right? So we just set up in our studio, which was actually quite large. And we built a really nice facility. Unfortunately, as time went on, the directors didn't want to come down to us. At that time, we were in La Costa. I don't know if you're familiar with La Costa, but there's a famous resort there called the La Costa Resort and Spa. And the idea was, if we
I'm
built
familiar
close
with the
to that,
shirts.
then of course the shirts actually come from there. Well, that used to be the money tournament. It was a PGA tournament on that private golf course. But the idea was to have a place that would be able to, for the stars, of course, to be treated in the way they were accustomed to. What we never figured in all of that was the directors. And so as we started getting less and less work in the studio, most of it was because the guys wouldn't come down to actually direct the video. The stars, were okay with it. And so we ended up using the studio for it, all kinds of other projects. And I think it was 86. We had a neighbor, Hunter Enterprises, and I don't know if you remember, but the first pop-up sprinklers ever made were made by a company called Hunter. And he also made the Polaris pool sweep and all these things. And he literally owned all the buildings around us. And so at that time, that's when they were selling products with how-to videos, like the little VCR tape.
Yeah.
And he wanted the studio so he could mass produce these videos. So at that time, we were really struggling. Because every dime we made went right back into the studio to support it. So we weren't being able to continue to build sound systems, which was what we knew how to do. So once we sold the studio, then that's when really we started to gain more and more abilities, because now we weren't just flooding all that cash into it. And so I think it was 86 when Hunter purchased that. And then we built a brand new building in San Marcos, California. And then we lasted there until I think we moved in at 89. It took a while to get it done. And we were there for about 6 years. And then that's really when we just started growing like crazy. I remember when we built the building, we said, well, this will be great because when we retire, we'll still be here. And literally in like 3 years, we were hemorrhaging at the seams. We were renting other buildings just to put gear in when it came on tour. And then that's when we built the old, the building you guys have been in, the last one. And then in 2015 was when we redid the one we're in now, which is quite large. I think it's around 120,000 or something square feet. And
just to clarify for the people out there, they moved
really.
from,
I mean,
it's all in the
I
same
didn't start
parking lot.
out. Yes, it was on the
Sorry,
same
go ahead,
campus,
Tater.
actually.
What'd you say?
And actually, even when Raw, oh, by the way, Tater, did I lose him?
Yeah, sorry, I lost connection for a minute.
I think
I'm
we're
back.
having some internet.
I don't have
We're having
Am I there?
internet problems here, guys. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
Love Zoom. Yeah, you're here, Tater. We can hear you. Go ahead.
What was the question again, Tater?
Or maybe not.
I
Or
was just
maybe not.
I was
I
clarifying
don't know what's
for
happened to
everybody.
Tater, Dave, but
I was
Tater, you there?
Keep your Mickey hats on, everybody. So,
think we're
hey,
frozen.
Dave,
Tater,
can you hear me?
Dave, why don't you carry on with your story there?
Dave, if you can hear
I can
me,
hear.
can you hear me? Okay, great. So I don't know what
Yes.
what's happened to Tater. We've lost him there, but part of this whole
Am I
thing,
here
the
now?
reason that we started this podcast was talking about. We wanted to talk about relationships, and we wanted to talk about, how Tater and I had this long-standing relationship. And I know earlier Tater mentioned that, and I know that, one of your partners and your mentors was Ross. And so maybe
Absolutely.
can you speak to that relationship and how that developed and where that's from and where it went
Sure.
to, and,
Sure.
share a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't met him. I mean, I don't know what twist or turn would have happened in the road. As I said, I met him back in the 70s, and we became friends. And of course, I was trying all kinds of different things. I mean, I was at one time I was actually selling cars, in a used car facility. But I mean, I did well enough that I was able to start purchasing cars on my own, like from different parts of the country. And so then I met Ross in, like I said, in 77 or 8, I think it was. And then we just started, and he just started teaching me, because he was actually the backbone of all that stuff. And as well as Mike Adams, who I think both of you guys know. And so they started showing me how to do stuff. And because Ross was a monitor engineer, and Joey and Mike and Jamie and some of the early people were front of house guys. So I learned how to do monitors from Ross. He taught me how to do it. And I think, that was the beginning of a relationship where we would actually even trade off sometimes, like we would have, 3 tours at one time. And so
Hey,
it was
Dave,
kinda like,
am I back?
You're
Yeah,
back.
you're back.
Okay. I know the answer to this, but you haven't said it yet, and I'd like to ask, why did you like to do the monitors better? What was the relationship? Why did you like it up on stage better?
Well, I like the instantaneous connection with my client, right? Because they're right there, and you become friends. I mean, I have a lot of lifelong friends that I met that way. Boz Skaggs, Jackson, lots of guys that I worked with, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, that I'm friends with now. And a lot of that's because of, as Tater knows, the interaction between the band. We're not like Pooch. We're not 90 feet away, right? And the other
I don't want to
reason-
be friends. I don't want to be friends. I like being at the
I
other
know.
end.
I knew you would say that. Well, that's what all house guys say. All house engineers say that.
He was keeping those clients close.
Yeah.
Well, see, Yeah, but see, for me, I learned kind of early on that if you became somewhat indisposable, meaning the sound guy, as the monitor guy with the band you were working with, that protected sound image as well, right?
Yeah.
Because it kept that relationship going. I was telling Tater a story yesterday about a thing I did with a client at the time. This was back in the late 80s, maybe, I think, or maybe 90s, something like that. But it was a Richard Marx thing. And they had went through several people. And there was another company that was actually doing that tour at the time. And when I got the call to come to Irvine Meadows, I did. And it worked out. And we actually got along famously. But it switched the deal, because my deal with the production manager of that tour was that if it works, then I can't stay out here and do it, you know, for these people, right? It has to be our equipment. And so we did, and it was all great. And I made a great relationship out of all of that with Billy Philpott. And I actually brought Billy on after we finished all that up, and I put him on Barbara Mandrell for like 10 years. So,
Sweet.
I mean, you know, that's the lifelong relationships we're talking about. You know, these things all get forged by moving around the parts, right? And one of the things
Speaking of Richard Marx, did you hear that he's the new lead singer of Skid Row now?
Richard
Oh,
Marx
you're
is
kidding me.
perfect.
Yeah, they call it
You're
Skid
making
Marks
that
now.
up.
Oh!
They call it Skid Mark.
I knew you were making it up. Skid Marks. Well, that's funny. Well, I knew you had to be kidding, because he has a tour to work in years and years and years. He became a very prolific producer and songwriter, actually, after all those big hits he had.
Yeah.
And I see him occasionally if he comes out here, but he doesn't perform very often. You know, it's real rare. But like I said, the relation.
Don't you think that things
Go ahead.
have changed, though, Dave, in regards to this business? You know, like, I feel like that sound guys don't have those kind of relationships. I have early on relationships in my career with some artists, but nowadays it seems so different. Are you seeing that as well?
Well, it's different for me because, you know, it's been 19 years since I stood behind a mixing console. My last tour was 2001. So at that time, you know, I mean, at that time, one of my artists I worked with was Kenny Babyface Edmonds, which was back when he was like the biggest, most prolific producer and songwriter probably in the world. You know, he had a stable of artists that was unbelievable. And he was also quite talented himself. And I was his monitor engineer for, I don't know, 5-6 years, something like that. And I did a tour with him that stopped in 91. I stopped with him. And then that was when Boz Scaggs had his last record on Virgin Records. It was called Dig, was the name of that album. And when it was, it finished sooner than it should. I think it was Danny Kuchmeyer was the producer. And so they just got it done sooner than I thought. So I had to go and talk to Kenny and say, hey, you know, I mean, I've known him most of my life, and I have to go do this because he wants me to. And we did. And then of course came 9/11, right when our tour ended. As a matter of fact, we were supposed to be doing 3 makeup shows. And we were supposed to fly that day to Florida to finish those 3 shows. And then would come Japan, Europe, and then New Zealand, Australia going into 2002. And, you know, my thing to me was always, I'll do this as long as I'm having fun, right? I mean, mixing, right? Because I had plenty to do at the office. There was no shortage of that. I mean, you know, back in those days, I used to sit at my console with 2 cell phones and a laptop and 500 foot of phone jack so I could go jack into Jim's office.
Awesome.
And use dial up, right? And so I mean, you know, I don't really know because I'm not in that spot, right? But I will say this: I still like to know the people I work with, meaning the artists themselves, meaning my company, right? So I go out of my way with every tour we do to go out and at least go to a couple, 3 shows and get introduced and meet Joe Perry or meet Kid Rock or meet these people we work with. Now, it's not the same relationship, like you're saying, because I don't think it can be. I'm just not there, you know. I'm like the guy who comes in, everything's great. I bring a whole bunch of shirts or jackets or whatever. And then I get on an airplane the next day and fly home. So I don't think I can speak to what you asked, Boots, personally. Now,
I understand. I just, in my experience, as this business has changed greatly, Tater and I have talked a lot about how those relationships have changed too. For instance, I mean, it's the real truth that in this COVID time period, not one of any millionaire that I have ever worked for is calling me and saying, "Hey, are you okay?"
right.
You know what I mean? So I'm just saying that is the realization of what the business is. And I'm trying to point out that when you were a mixer in this business, it was a different kind of a time, I think.
It certainly was. And I mean, it was a lot less controllable like it is now with, if you go back to probably 99, 2000, that's when all this consolidation started. We had SFX with Robert Silliman and then spinning off into Live Nation and then AEG and all this stuff. And I mean, now when you get right down to it, about 85% of our industry of every live performance out there is between those two companies, right? So that changes a lot of the dynamic. And then we saw a lot of the old companies go away. I mean, I'm one of I guess us and Claire, really are the last of not the last of, but you know what I mean, the most probably busy of the old school thing. It's funny because last night I was reading Bill Hanley's book. Have you seen Bill's book?
I've
seen
it, but I've seen it. Yeah.
Well, when Bill got introduced into the Hall of Fame himself personally, he actually asked me, which I was blown away by. I was just totally honored because he's my guy, right? I mean, when I look at why we all have jobs and how we all got to where we're at now, I look back at Bill Hanley and I think, my God, if it hadn't been for him, where would we be? I mean, portable sound did not exist.
Right.
Now, and so when he asked me to actually do the induction for him, I was just, it floored me. And yesterday, after Tater and I spoke on the phone, I got a package in the mail and it was his book signed.
Nice.
Wow.
And so last night I sat down and I got to, it's 400 and something pages long. And I got to about page 110 or something before I put it down and went to bed. And so it was interesting though, because he had bylines in there about Silverfish Audio. He had stuff, he has this thing where he divides it up into what he calls the 2 separate eras, right? Meaning him, Stan Miller, remember Stan L Sound, stuff like that. And then he goes into what he calls the new guys who were coming along and changing things and making it more compact and more portable and all this stuff. And Silverfish Audio with Ross and Joel's name was right there. Gave me a little heart thumper because I don't want to lose train of thought, but I want to go back because you had asked me about Ross. And Ross was everything. I mean, as far as he taught me everything I know. The difference was he was not a very good businessman. And I don't know that I'm a great businessman, but I did learn how to do things as we went along. I mean, I can remember doing the books with one of those big ledgers, the fold out things. And I used to sit there at night and I'd write down what came in and what went out and what we did and everything like that. So I was more self-taught. He was less concerned with that stuff. Let's just say that. And so our relationship was great because we were 2 guys and people always wanted to know, how did you guys stay together? Because a lot of these type of things, the partners would split up, they would fall out of favor with one another, and I always said, because we were the most opposite guys possible, right? We hardly ever ate dinner together. Once things started moving along, let's say by the mid 80s, we were both married. We both had our family, but we never really spent a lot of time together outside of the office. And I think that was an important part of our relationship. We never lost our love for each other, but
Interesting.
we just kind of pushed our life out. So we had private life and we had work life. And so that to me is, I think about him all the time still, it's been 10 years and it's almost unfathomable for me when I think about it, that it's been that long now. And I miss him dearly. And what I miss the most is our camaraderie, right? Because, it was great when we were both together because we had our own places to go and do things. And now I have to do it all, and it was nice to have someone to bounce things off of too.
Going back a bit, when you started to talk about the consolidations of the promoters, going
Right.
from local promoters to, Live Nation, SFX, and that whole thing. Now, at the same time, the sound companies were becoming video houses and lighting and
Sure.
everything, one-stop shop trucking and all that kind of stuff. What, other than the original video studio, what kept Sound Image just being what I'd like to call a pure sound company run by sound people? What kept Sound Image there and not changing and buying everything in the world to do lighting and everything?
Well, that's an easy answer because we did the video studio. We learned a lesson, a very valuable lesson. I try to teach everybody: do what you know, because if you don't know it, you probably won't be very good at it. And I learned after all that was over, I thought, man, it's hard. It's a hard thing to be really good at something. Okay. Everyone strives to be the best they can. We do. Do we make mistakes? Sure, we all do. But I knew that if we didn't veer off that path, that we would be really good at doing audio. And I can't imagine how those companies that do that have they must be a lot of internal problems is all I can say, because you're trying to teach guys to do lighting. You got to have crews for that. We get so busy, I'm trying to get the janitor to be the fourth man on a tour sometimes. Could you imagine if you did video and staging and lighting and all this stuff? It would just be an incredible dynamic of training alone.
Yeah.
We spend probably a fair amount, I would say close to a couple of months every year with different training seminars, consoles, speaker boxes, amplification, distribution of electrical, all these things. And we do it every year. And we do it because, of course, new people come along. And we also want everyone to understand exactly what they're doing, right? I don't want a guy that just knows if he takes the orange tape and puts it into the orange hole, he gets what he gets. I want them to understand why this happens. And I think personally, it's becoming a lost art.
Yeah,
signal.
I totally agree.
I think it totally is.
Great point.
As a mixer, and I know you've experienced this too, I want all my guys, even the guy that's just flying stage right PA, I want him to be able to hop in to a console problem. You know what I mean? That guy's got to be on top of all of it. He's not just going to be the stage right PA guy. He's got to be a part of the team.
Absolutely.
That's just good business.
Yeah.
Well,
any
absolutely.
Tech,
And I tell you, one of the lost arts in all of this is, as I said, it's signal flow. How can you help like Tater and Pooch are on a tour, and if they don't understand where this originates at, okay, because there's miles and miles of cable and connectors and all this stuff, you have to know when you see a problem, where to go look first, right? You got what's your thing called? Gazenta or whatever this.
Gazenta and Gazauta, yeah.
So you got to know the Gazenta and the Gazauta, because if you don't, how are you going to know how to do your job? So we start at that very basic level when people come in. And one of the other thing we try to teach fairly adept is power distros, right? Electrical distribution, because, that can be the source of a lot of problems if they don't understand what they're looking for.
Yeah,
correct.
For sure.
Matter of fact, as we speak, this entire week is dedicated at our shop right now because, we're still we're limiting how many people come in and stuff. But, you know, we rotate them because everybody's still on payroll. Everybody's getting their health insurance packages and stuff like that. I mean, we were fortunate enough to be able to plug away, so to speak. Part of that's because we have a good integration department, and they've been very, very busy. They've finished 3 or 4 really large jobs, and they've signed 4 or 5 more new ones, which is a godsend, right? Because, as you said,
during this time for sure, yeah, that's crazy, man.
Yeah,
and I'm just audio, as you say. And we also, another thing we started doing probably 20 years ago as a way to divest and make some more income is just box sales. You know, sell somebody a console, sell somebody a 24 box speaker system, which we just did today, actually. And, you know, those things just kind of keep it rolling while we're in this moment of transition here, waiting for our industry to come back so we can get back out there and do things.
So speaking of selling boxes and all that kind of stuff, let's go back to the time of maybe staff engineers or independents just coming in and your Audio Innovation Award. Let's talk about like when your some of the innovations you had, like back when maybe the younger people out there don't know this, but sound companies sometimes had their own consoles. Like Claire had their own. What they have? Console 5. Shoko had Harrison's. Even Audio Analyst had the CAD console of theirs.
Yeah, that's right.
You had a console too, right?
Yeah. We called it a super console. It was as I remember, it was Billy Thompson and David that were the guys who formed Ashley Audio, and these guys were really, really smart electrically, and between Ross, Adams, Billy, and a little bit of Joey, not so much me, but I mean, I was involved. I helped. They came up with a 40-channel console, which at the time no one had. Everybody was stopping at 32. And the 40-channel console had it had 8 insertable parametric EQs that could go into a subgroup, a channel, anything, parametric EQ. It had 8 compressors, Pooch, that went on the outputs, and you could kick them in, kick them out, right? And if you wanted to use them as a direct patch, you could actually take a guitar chord and go out of comp 1 and go into channel 2, right? and so then you flipped it to insert, right? But it was right there in the output section. And it was actually a brilliant thing. I think it was Chick Corea, us, and there was a few other people back in those days. And all those consoles really started Ashley Audio. I think Tater probably remembers the old blue parametric EQs.
And the crossovers, blue crossovers.
And the crossovers. And the crossovers were built into the console. They were actually on the meter bridge, and they were 4-way tunable crossovers. So, I mean, you could move the crossover point in the middle of the show. You know, you could gas it, you know. They were actually very innovative. And the funny thing about them is they had a whole ground bus system that was a copper bus bar. And the console's chassis, Pooch, was made out of, it was a fiberglass bucket.
Nice.
So the damn things didn't weigh anything. I mean, and that was one of those innovative things that we did.
Well, while we're on the innovation and you're talking about fiberglass buckets, can we go into just a hair about the composite manufacturing?
Yes. Well, that composite stuff started in the early 90s, 93, 3, right in there. And it all started because we got the contract for America's Cup. I mean, that was everything comes from something, right? And as crazy as it sounds, it was Ross. And, my partner was a boat guy all of his life. I always had a boat, always had a beautiful sailboat. At the end of his life, he had a gorgeous Nordhaven, 100-foot Nordhaven. So one of the things that we were doing the America's Cup Village, right? Because it was in San Diego. That's when Jimmy Connors had the Stars and Stripes and all that stuff. And so Ross got to meet these guys, and we got to go, they put these things behind a curtain, literally. No one could see the keel. It's a big science thing. And we found out that they were using carbon fiber composite technology to build these holes. That's what made the boat so light and strong. And that was kind of like the beginning of talking about it. And one day we were sitting there looking at these boats, and I remember looking at the boat, right? Here's the boat. And I said, well, shit, if you put a baffle on that thing, it'd be a speaker, and it would weigh literally nothing compared to what we're doing now, but stronger, more rigid, everything. So we started playing around with it, and we made 4 two-way 12-inch, 2-inch wave-guided horn wedges, okay? And about the time we finished them was when Pink Floyd was starting rehearsals for the 94 Division Bell tour. Yeah. And I got a phone call from my good friend who I worked with on Cyndi Lauper, Seth Goldman. And Seth Goldman was a monitor engineer for every tour Pink Floyd ever did. And he called up and he said, we're using this new Turbo Sound flashlight floodlight, and they made this new monitor that's a double 15 with this triangular horn. And he says, it's okay, but Roger and Nick don't like it. I think it was Roger and Nick. Anyways, the band liked sound system, but didn't care for the monitor. He said, how are those things you're working on coming along? And I took them and put them in the back of my pickup truck and drove them up to Edwards Air Force Base, or Anderson, whichever one it was. And they said, oh, this is fantastic. We'd like to use these for the tour. Can you make more of them? And I said, well, those are prototypes. I mean, would have to work into it. And he goes, well, in 30 days, I need 40 of them.
That's working into it. All right.
and he says, can you do it? You know, and of course, you know, in our business, there's no such thing as no. Right? True. So I said, oh, sure. And I walked out of there thinking, what the hell have I got myself into? I go back, I tell Ross, he's like, oh my God, we can't get this done. You know, Adams is having a cow. We hire 2 aerospace engineers from Boeing in Seattle. We bring them down. They show us how to use the ovens and the material and how to put the core materials in. And we had to try many different cores, right? Because that's where we were getting the sound quality, almost like a studio wall, Pooch. You know what I mean? Double wall.
Yep, I totally know.
Dead airspace. One of the reasons they were so light was all that dead airspace, you know. But I think that wedge weighed something like 64 pounds or something. I mean, one of the problems we had once the tour got going is they kept walking away because, you know, you put too much.
They were so light. Yeah.
They started jumping around. So we had to put these, you know, when you're in a bus and they have that little thing on the counter so your drink don't slide off, that little material. That's what we put on the bottom of them.
I love it.
So that was the beginning, and really it was another one of those things of what is it? The mother of invention. What's that old line? The necessity is it creates it, right?
Yeah, totally.
So we got through that, and then we started building the big cabinets, the G5, okay, the full range touring boxes. And one of the first big tours they ever did. Well, actually, I built 2 systems of that stuff, and one of them was out originally on Jimmy because Jimmy was always, you know, he's like Mikey, right? You can't get in trouble there. And I hope he's not watching. But, you know, he was always, I mean, I have to go back to Jimmy Buffett being a client of Sound Image since 1975.
Right.
And if Ross and I had it to do all over again, we actually talked about this. Who knew that this man's going to have a 45-year, top of the line, I mean, you know, sells out everywhere he goes, everything, career. Would we have built this behemoth, or would we have just done that? Right.
Right.
And I think there's no way to go back in retrospect, but you know, obviously we could have had a really nice life without a lot of freaking problems. if we would have just went along that. Of course, you don't know those things are going to happen. But the one thing about Jimmy, and he's always been very great, because we were always working on the next new widget, you know, whether it was an amplification thing or a speaker thing or whatever it was. You know, we did the first fiber optic controlled sound system in the world, right? Back in the 90s, we had all the signal was on fiber optics. And of course, he says, oh, no problem. You know, you guys can do this. We don't know if it's going to work.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, you come you're talking about a period, you know, a lot of our listeners are young kids, right? So they have grown up in a time when it's, you know, speakers that come from major manufacturers. They don't know that during that time period, everybody was building their own proprietary stuff, which
there was no off-the-shelf speakers per se.
Totally.
The first speaker that I remember that ever got any real traction was when EAW in like 1980 or 81, whenever that was, came out with the
850.
KF 850.
Yeah.
Right. And then after that, there was a project with, Electro Voice, remember, which was, what was that called, Pooch? MT4.
MT4. Yeah, that's it.
And actually, we helped work with that with Electro Voice, because at the time we were starting to use some Electro Voice speakers because they had those big subwoofers, the 180 amp, whatever it was. And so we got into bed with them. But I guess the most prolific thing was after the G5s and all that stuff, we were approached by JBL, and JBL wanted to know if we would co-produce a loudspeaker for them, because the one they had done right before it had been a horrible failure. I can't remember what it was called. Do you remember, Pooch? It was like a lighting truss. Remember?
HLA.
I can see it. I just don't remember what it was called.
HLA.
HLA.
Oh, HLA. That's what it was. Yeah.
And it had more sound coming off the backside, or as much as it did, because it was a magazine, right? It was just open. Right?
Yeah, it looked like a lighting truss.
It did. It looked like a lighting truss, and it actually bolted together like a lighting truss.
Yeah.
There were some kind of innovative ideas there, but they were a little late to the game and a little cumbersome. And so that's when they came to us and they said, "Hey, this composite thing looks really amazing, and would you guys help us make this? We need a new product." And that new product became Vertec 4889, which was a composite enclosure. And at that time, the only real competitor in line array at that time, when they first came out, was VDOS. And VDOS weighed like 300 and some pounds, right? And this box weighed like 100 pounds. And it was more rigid. It didn't need to be painted. There was all kinds of benefits to it. And there was a guy named Mark Ingebrigtsen, who was a dear friend of mine, and we collaborated on many projects over the years, whether he was with me or working somewhere else. And then Mike Ingebrigtsen, Ross, and myself, we were instrumental in getting that product to market. And a little known fact about that product was they sold to something like 30,000 enclosures. Wow. By far and away the most largest selling off-the-shelf speaker ever. I mean, amazing enough. It was just an amazing thing.
Yeah, Jesse Adamson says the Y18 came first.
Just saying.
Good old Jesse.
He did?
He chimed in.
Yeah,
he just chimed in on the chat. He said Y18 comes first.
It did, first. Really?
Yeah, that's what he said.
It was before 2000?
He says 99.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Well, he would know.
I think he would.
He would know. I knew it was right in that same time frame.
Yeah.
He said, but we only sold 12 of them.
Great, I love it.
Yeah. Well, all total in the VTX line, by the time it was over, it sold north of about 70,000 enclosures between the 89, the 88, the 87, the subs, all that stuff. It was an amazing selling product. And we may not see anyone do that again, right? No. At that number.
Yeah. At that number, for sure.
Because the competition's bigger too, right? Now you have more players. Adamson's grown quite a bit. Harman's still doing what they do. They're still selling. I'm not involved with the new products. And then, of course, L-Acoustics, D&B.
Yeah.
There's some good products out there. And I mean, you're splitting hairs, really.
No, that's true. I always tell people that when you're talking about the top 5 PAs out there, I'll take any one of them. It's really just talking about flavor.
And I think, going back to what you were saying, any of those top five PAs, if the people at the company are trained properly and they implement it, and you walk up to your Digico console, you're off, right?
Totally.
Right. I mean, that's really the key.
Totally. Hey, as we get towards the end of this, we have only about 15 minutes left. Earlier you were speaking about how sound image was actually doing kind of okay in this time period, with COVID. You guys have gotten some contracts and that kind of stuff. I think we all need some good news. And that to me was very good news. I felt very good about that. But speak to what's our future? Like, what do you think is going to happen in all of this? What's your opinion about when we're going back to work?
I mean, I might not be the right guy. Of course, as you said, you haven't talked to a lot of people, but I keep continually talking to people at the production. The promoters, the people up in the ivory tower, so to speak. And I feel like in June and July, we're going to see, as we used to say when we were kids and we went to the local swimming hole, the first guy there would put his toe in the water to test it. So somebody's got to put the toe in the water. And I think the toe in the water, in a way, was this Keith Urban thing on Thursday, the wrestling thing that we're doing down in Florida. Again, no audience, right? I mean, right. Keith Urban was a drive-in type thing, okay? The thing we did at the steel mill in Nashville with on Wednesday last week was Brad Paisley, and then a separate broadcast with Lady Antebellum for their new album, and they've got a hit single out. So anyways, that's kind of the toe in the water, right? We're starting to see the toe in the water. Yesterday, I get a call. I can't say who it is because they won't let me.
Well, you
but
could.
Well, no, I can't.
No, I mean, you could.
You could.
I'll cut my balls off, Tater.
But I can't. Okay.
Anyways, I got a call, a request for a proposal yesterday. I worked on it this morning before we started. I'm going to send it off later this afternoon. It's 10 to 15 shows. It's in a very large area. It's in not in California. And it's going to be people coming up in their car. But it's not going to be like 200. Where'd Jim go? We lose him?
Yeah.
No,
there he is.
Oh, but it's not going to be I don't think it'll be 10,000 people. I mean, it might be, I don't know, 3 or 4 people in a car, a couple thousand cars, something like that. I know where the space is, and you could easily get a couple thousand cars in there.
How do you make that?
It's dangerous to do Burning Man in your car, isn't it?
No, it's not Burning Man.
Hey, Dave, let me before we end this, I want to get a question in. We've had some good response from younger viewers, and Hannah from the Sound Girls gave us a little shout out. But when you're these younger people are technicians or younger mixers are trying to get into a sound company, right? They never hear from the owner like a Dave SHADOAN. They have to go through a small. That's what I'm saying. So they have to go through somebody on your team and all that kind of stuff. But let's hear directly from you, the owner that started the company. What does he want out of those younger employees?
Great question.
First of all, I want them to go through the learning process. I don't want them to come to me from a university teaching program and tell me that they know everything. That's first, because being humble is an asset, right? So you could be very smart, but you still have to learn our way. We have a process. We have a way we do things. We have a way we bring people up. There's a mentoring program with older guys, okay? So we're going to take that guy, that young person, we're going to put him out on a tour with a 4 or 5 man crew, and they're going to be the feeder jockey, right? And they may think they should be mixing the Rolling Stones that week, but that's not going to happen. It's unrealistic, okay?
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing is, like I said, being humble and behaving. I like people who behave. And by that, I don't say I want to change your lifestyle or anything, but when you're at work, do your job. And in the famous words of my old friend Everett Leibold, shut your gob and turn the knob.
I think it's a great point that people, when you're a young kid, you need to know when to speak. That's a skill, right? Like figuring out when you should be standing there and absorbing what's happening and then know when to speak. That's a real skill, I think, for a young kid.
I just like that the owner.
It is a skill. And I always tell them, if you don't know when to speak, that means don't speak.
Right.
So you've just heard from the owner of a major sound company that sound knowledge isn't at the top of his list, just for everybody out there listening. It's, attitude and the willingness to learn.
Well, and as let's face it, you got, 50 sweaty people living on, and they need to have a certain demeanor to just get along. I mean, I'll tell you right now, one of the biggest problems I have, the youngest people who come in, is they think this is a career, which I can tell you, when I was that young guy and I saw this opportunity in front of me, I seized the moment because I said, I don't even know if this thing will be around forever, but it's fun. So have fun. That's important, right? For these young people, have fun, enjoy what you're doing, because we're probably, I'd say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50% of all the young people we bring in. And even if we train them, and even if they work for 2 or 3 years or whatever, they just kind of wake up one day and go, man, this isn't really what I thought it was. This is really hard work. I mean, we're working a 16-hour day. We're driving from city to city. I'm not home for 6 months. Oh my God, they didn't tell me this at college. I mean, let's face it. All 4 of these people I see right here, we all know what a hard day's work is on the road. We know. And it's a hard thing to get the younger people to understand the commitment. And I think that's more important to me. I can teach you, our staff, our instructors, our tech shop, also, we can teach people almost anything, right? But what we can't teach them are those intangibles that are really important. And of course, there's a certain way I want them to represent the company as well, with respect and show some dignity, right?
Yeah. I think what I'm seeing in the younger people is that, I do see some hardworking young people. I really do.
Sure.
And I see a lot of heart and a lot of desire. What's different, I think, from when I was called a young person to now is, the idea that we kind of just made it up as we went. We were still breaking new ground in the industry, and we played without a rule book, and still to this day, in large part do. It seems that the younger people are coming into the space with a greater desire for a rule book, or at least some signposts along the way about what to do, what's expected, because HR is a whole new story arc in our business that never right? So for better or worse, the expectations are the young people are really the direction we're heading.
Jim, who knew I'd have a staff of attorneys, a bunch of accountants, and a HR department? Jesus. 25 years ago, I didn't know what HR was.
Yeah. But it is changing in that way.
Yeah.
Yes, it's becoming more organized. And we do have a handbook. I mean, everyone who signs on, signs up. They get their rules and regulations and their guidance in that. But yeah, I think I don't disagree with you, Jim, that there are certainly young people coming in. But like I said, the biggest problem we see is we'll get 4 or 5 years into training someone and they get married. And as soon as they get married, what happens? The wife doesn't want them to go on the road anymore.
Yes.
So I've seen the same kind of situation you talked about, where a university type might have higher expectations for themselves coming into the job without having cut their teeth on anything hard like 4-aught. So but it is important, that on the job training is incredibly important in our industry specifically, because of how unique it is.
Yeah.
I'd argue that it has to do with the right person, right? Because I'm a guy that has a master's degree. I'm a guy that went to school for 8 years, and I still love doing what I do and love the hard work part of this. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it just, I think, you know, it really mattered. I know, Dave, you are super close to your family. You always go, I always hear about you going out to visit your mom, you know, for months on end. And I think it comes from that, right? It comes from a strong background.
Well, you know, it's that Midwestern upbringing, you know, I mean, they teach you, you know, you don't sass your dad, because if you do, when I was a kid, if dad said, if you say one more word, I'm going to pull this car over, you didn't say one more word, you know, because he was going to pull it over and yank your ass out and kick your butt.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. That's right.
So we learned a certain type of discipline. And like I said, one of the things that I remember the most, and it's still dear to me, it's why I'm still doing it, is I just felt like it was a gift, man. I got a profession that was cool. I got to do these things. I got that, you know, how your hands sweat right when the lights go down and you're touching the knob. And I mean, that you can't take that feeling away if you have it, right? Some people will try to do this and they may not have that dynamic. It's not part of their makeup. Yeah. And I get that. But I mean, to me, man, I still miss that part of standing behind a mixing console.
Oh, you man, there's nothing like the instant gratification of 10,000 people screaming for something that you're doing. It's amazing, right? It's a drug.
I'm gonna share something here. Me and Dave, in the later years, we figured out that we first worked together 30 years ago, and I keep a picture on my desk of that gig. I don't know if I can get it on my camera, but if you can see,
wow, look at that.
If you can see that.
I see Jimmy and Eric and Robert and
and that was the day 30 years ago. Just about this August, me and Dave first worked together, and I keep that picture up here on my desk. And I just saw it and brought it down. And unfortunately, it was a tragic weekend, but it was the weekend we had first worked together. So thought I'd share that.
And honestly, I didn't even remember. Tater reminded me because somehow we started talking about Stevie Ray Vaughan or something. And I said, yeah, at the last show, I left with the bass player and the drummer and all this stuff. And we left early because the end of the show was all those guitar players jamming together to Sweet Home Chicago. And I had seen it the night before. And so I kind of just said, hey, you guys got it. I'm out of here. I jumped in a limo. I drove off. The next morning, of course, my phone rang and we knew that Stevie had perished in the helicopter crash, which was really unfortunate. I got to tell you, Tater was there. He saw it. He'd seen it before too, but I had done 2 tours with them. And I got to tell you, man, he may be the best I've ever seen.
Fantastic.
I mean, at that time it was magic. I mean, I don't know how he did it. You know, there's something to that degree of music coming out of your soul, out of your body, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can learn the notes, but that doesn't mean it's going to sound like that.
Yeah, he definitely was.
That young girl playing drums. She does a little Twitter feed thing. She's amazing. That's what I think of her when I think of music, just like it's coming from the devil. It's not coming from, you know, technique. It's coming from inside of you. She's incredible.
You're not playing the instrument. Yeah, it's just there. It's just, you're just an extension of the instrument. Yeah.
Yeah, we've all seen it. I mean, there's people out there, they're just born with that gift. That's their thing.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. That's totally true. Hey, one last question before we let you go, Dave. You know, you could have stopped doing this a lot of years ago, right? It's not, you aren't doing this for the money anymore. What is?
Of course I am.
Okay, maybe you are, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying you could have stopped doing this a lot, and you touched on this just a minute ago about how much you love it. But I mean, what is it about this that keeps you going? Why do you, you know, why are you here? Why are you still here?
Well, I mean, I'm here because of the music. It's that simple. When I get to see a performance or whatever, it all goes back to my roots, right? I mean, I wish I would have kept playing, right? Even Jesse's been trying to encourage me again, right? But,
nice.
You know, I got absorbed. I learned a new profession and all this stuff, but I started pulling my guitars out. I'm thinking about buying a saxophone because that's what I was trained on musically. I mean, I went through the whole thing, you know, writing music, scoring, the whole thing through the program. And then when I got out here, of course, you know, I turned left and I ended up on the other side of the microphone. But the passion and the desire to just hear what I consider one of the most important art forms in modern times, you know, because it brings us together. We're tribal. That's what we are. We're tribal people. And these things bring us together. And I can't wait until we get together again.
Oh man, neither.
Wow, that
can
was
I.
You ended up on
That's
the
it.
right end of the snake.
But that's it.
That was a
on the
quick
right
That's
hour.
it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But that's it in a nutshell, Pooch. The reason I'm still here is because I still love everything about it.
That's
You
so
know,
awesome.
even when I'm having a bad day, it's still better than most people's good day.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. It's why I'm here too. So thank you, Dave, so much for coming and sharing all your knowledge and everything. And we're so grateful that you were able to come join us.
Well, it was my pleasure. I was
Thank
just
you.
happy to get, you know, something to do.
Well, you know what? I'm really looking forward to when we can see you in person and we go and get to do this again. And so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. We really
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Not-
It was my pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Stay healthy,
seeing
buddy.
y'all.
Stay healthy.
take care, guys.
All right.